All right, today we're watching Antarctica, like a crazy video about scary Antarctica stuff. I don't want to call myself an expert, but I know a lot about Antarctica. I've watched a lot of videos because it interests me a lot. So apparently this one's really long, so hopefully it's really good. It's called Horrors of Antarctica. I guarantee this is just going to be a video. There isn't going to be anything crazy in this video. It's just going to be like missing ships in Antarctica or whatever.
Antarctica is one of the most disturbing places on Earth. I made a video a while ago about the horrors
Ooh,
of
I'm gonna
the
watch
deep
that
ocean,
next.
and think of this as a sequel to that if you've seen
Okay.
that one. I'm gonna talk about the scary parts of Antarctica.
Bro, what is this like character, dude?
There are a lot. From actual disturbing historical moments to weird Antarctic biology and
Weird Antarctic biology. I even know about this one. I told you guys I know so much about this. The weird Antarctic biology is that since it's colder, the oxygen is more just like at the bottom of the ocean. So the animals under the water in Antarctica are a lot bigger. Just like deep sea gigantism, where animals get deep when you go deeper because the oxygen is more compact. When you're in the cold, it's more compact as well, so they get bigger as well.
to some Antarctic mysteries.
That's not a mystery. That is just its color. It's the color of blood because there's so much iron in the water because it comes out of like a thing, like a very old thing of water with where the iron got so dense it turned red.
And then even some human psychological horror of Antarctica. There's
That's what I'm here for.
a lot to cover. So without any further ado,
Subscribe
So
to
let's
Gabe
fix
Grimm
that.
on YouTube.
Hey, he lied
Also,
right
this
there.
guy, though, his
27%
videos
are
is chill.
follow the
subscribed.
Instagram, this is me, and join the Discord so we can talk.
Bro,
So
I
let's fix
don't
that.
want to shit
Follow
on
the
this dude, but like, you can't be posting your physique when it's like that. I'm sorry. This is coming from someone who's been lifting for like 3 years. You can't be posting your physique when you look like. Sorry, dude. I'm sorry. You're probably a chill guy, but it's for real.
Instagram, this is me, and join the Discord so we can talk. And then let's get straight into this video. Okay, I'm gonna start by talking about the Terra Nova expedition. So this was an expedition
This was definitely just some dudes who got lost there and had to eat people who died. I bet.
headed by Robert Falcon Scott in 1910. At the start of the 20th century, reaching the South Pole was considered one of the final unsolved geographic challenges on Earth.
Right
No
on.
one had ever been there. There were no established routes, no reliable weather data, and no proven survival strategy for crossing Antarctica's interior. The Terra Nova expedition was Britain's attempt to be the first to reach the pole and return, while also conducting scientific research along the way. Robert Falcon Scott was not entering unknown territory blindly. He had prior Antarctic experience and was leading what was, for its time, a well-funded, well-planned national effort. The
I'm pretty sure I have heard of
used
this.
a mix of motor sledges, ponies, and dogs, which is kind of funny to look back in today's time because it points to like how uncertain they were back then about what methods would actually work in extreme cold. From the beginning, the plan depended on precise timing, exact fuel
Damn, that's
placement,
how they were moving? They were carrying their stuff like that? That's cooked.
and the assumption that weather conditions would stay within survivable limits. Scott and a 5-man polar party reached the South Pole on January 17th, 1912. But instead of an untouched landmark, they found a tent already standing, marked
What?
with the Norwegian flag. Roald
No way.
Amundsen had arrived more than a month earlier and had already left. The primary
Bro.
goal of the expedition, being first, was already lost.
Bro, that would suck. I mean, obviously it's still awesome that you were able to do that, but that would suck.
But the team still had to make the same dangerous journey back across the ice. And the return trip really started to point out how fragile
Why is
their
Minecraft
margin
playing?
of survival really
What is this
was.
texture pack?
Temperatures dropped lower than anticipated, fuel
That's kind of a fire-ass texture pack. I kind of want that.
supplies ran short, and food rations were barely sufficient even under ideal conditions. Edgar Evans deteriorated first, likely from a combination of injury,
Rest in peace, Edgar.
exhaustion, and hypothermia. hypothermia and died on the march. Lawrence Oates developed severe frostbite and gangrene in his feet, becoming
Damn.
unable to walk without slowing the group to a dangerous pace.
Rest in peace.
Recognizing that he was endangering the others, Oates voluntarily walked out of the tent into a blizzard, effectively choosing death to give the rest a chance to survive.
Hell yeah, that's
It
kind of
wasn't
lit.
enough though. Scott, Edward Wilson, and Henry Bowers continued north, but were eventually pinned down by a prolonged storm. They were approximately 11
sucks.
miles from a supply depot, close
Bro, this gameplay is kind of fire. This texture pack is
enough
sick.
that under slightly
And the
better
shaders?
conditions, they almost certainly would have reached it. Instead, they
Bro.
ran out of food and fuel and were forced to remain in their tent, where
Rest in-
all three died from a combination of starvation, hypothermia, and exhaustion.
Damn,
what we
rip.
know about their final days comes almost entirely from Scott's journals. He continued writing until physical collapse made it impossible, and the entries show a slow, methodical narrowing of thought. Early on, the writing is still practical, notes about weather, distances, and rationing. But as the days pass, the focus shifts. Time stops being measured in miles and becomes measured in waiting for the storm to break, waiting for strength to return, or anything to change. The tone of the entries becomes increasingly resigned rather than
This is random, but he should have included that after he said that or before that he said that they all died. Because now I already know what happens. They all die. But if he read the journal before, then it would create some suspense. Heads up, guy.
panicked. Scott writes about their situation with a calm that feels out of place, acknowledging that they are likely beyond rescue while still documenting events as if survival were technically possible. And there's no dramatic final revelation or anything, just an acceptance that effort is no longer enough. The act of writing itself seems to become a way of maintaining order in a situation where control has completely disappeared. As conditions worsened, the entries show clear signs of physical and cognitive decline. Thoughts repeat, sentences become shorter and less structured. There are long gaps between entries, suggesting days where writing was no longer possible. Even so, Scott continued to record small observations. The cold, the wind, the difficulty of movement, long after those details had stopped being useful. It's kind of less a logbook by the end and more like a record of consciousness slowly shutting down. Near the end, the journal shifts away from the expedition entirely. Scott writes messages intended for the families of the dead and for the public back home, framing the outcome not as failure but as endurance. He asks that their deaths be understood in context, emphasizing effort, duty, and sacrifice. It's
Right
really
on.
unsettling how clearly he understands the situation by this point. There's no confusion about what's happening, only the knowledge that nothing can be done to stop it. And I'm not gonna
Oh, that is terrifying. You just know you're about to die. There's nothing you can do about it. That's kind of life, though. Everyone's gonna die when everything's gonna kill you. At least they got to do it doing something cool as shit instead of just living a life that sucks, working a 9 to 5, and then dying because you got so stressed out.
waste time or bore you guys by reading too much of this, because I mean the way it's written is kind of boring. Obviously not like totally, but just the language is scattered and stuff, but it's a very interesting read. You can actually buy the book. It's not boring, but I mean, you know what I mean, like for a video it'd be boring to just read a whole lot of it. But I will read the final entry. Thursday, March 29th. We had fuel to make 2 cups of tea apiece and bare food for 2 days on the 20th. Every day we have been ready to start for our depot 11 miles away. But outside the door of the tent, it remains a scene of whirling drift. I do not think we can hope for better things now. We shall stick it out until the end. But we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more.
Okay, like I want to be able to say if I was there that I would just go. I would just walk the 11 miles in the blizzard and I would make it. Like I want to think realistically, I would probably, because you would probably get like turned around if you're stuck in a blizzard like that. You probably wouldn't know where you're going because it's just all white. Unless you had a compass, I would have a compass with me and then I would get back safely. Actually, there you go. I would survive.
God, that is so sad, dude. Man, we're starting the video with this one, dude. Can it get even, like, sadder than this? Can it get any more sadder? Next, I'm gonna talk about Ernest Shackleton's Endurance Expedition from 1914. By 1914, the race to the South Pole was already over. Roald Amundsen had won it. The Robert Falcon Scott expedition did its thing. So Shackleton's Endurance Expedition wasn't about reaching it first. This expedition was about crossing the entire Antarctic continent from one side to the other, something
Damn.
no one had ever done. The plan required precise timing, a ship to deliver men and supplies to one
I'll bet he goes missing because there's a secret entrance to Agartha in Antarctica.
coast and another team waiting on the opposite side. Before the expedition could even reach Antarctica's mainland, the ship Endurance became trapped in dense pack
Wait, hold on. I'm pretty sure I've heard of this, and that ship is still there.
ice in the Weddell Sea, or the Weddell Sea. For months, the ship drifted helplessly as the ice
Oh, they ate each other. I've heard this one.
tightened around it. And this disaster wasn't really sudden either. The pressure built slowly, grinding the hull apart plank by plank. In October 1915, the ship was crushed beyond repair. By November, it sank, leaving the crew stranded on drifting ice with no land in sight. From that point on, survival depended on strict control of behavior and resources. The crew salvaged what they could before the ship went down and set up camps directly on the ice. Food was rationed tightly, heat was minimal, movement was dangerous because the ice beneath them could fracture at any time. There was no clear route to safety, only drifting, waiting, and reacting to conditions as they changed. As the ice floes broke apart, the crew was forced onto lifeboats and eventually reached Elephant Island, a barren, uninhabited rock where rescue was extremely unlikely. Shackleton understood that waiting would almost certainly lead to death. He selected 5 men and took the strongest lifeboat, the James Caird, attempting an open ocean journey of roughly 800 miles across the Southern Ocean to reach South Georgia. And by the way, I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but it also low-key was my first thought. South Georgia is not the US state. It is an island in the South Atlantic Ocean that's a part of like the British
When he said Georgia, I was thinking the country, not the US state. But yeah, okay, that makes more sense.
territories. And it's right here. So, yeah. Anyway, the crossing took over 2 weeks in some of the worst seas on Earth. Waves regularly broke over the foot, freezing the ice as they landed. Navigation was done using brief sightings of the sun between storms. A simple navigational error would have meant missing the island entirely and drifting until death. When they finally reached South Georgia, Shackleton still had to cross the island's unmapped interior on foot to reach a whaling station. After multiple failed rescue attempts, Shackleton returned to Elephant Island in August 1916 and recovered every remaining crew member.
Oh, shit.
No one died. The expedition lasted nearly
This is not the one I've heard about. There's one where they are cannibals, I swear.
2 years, and survival depended on just like constant discipline and leadership and just grit. It's crazy.
Right on.
Next, I'm gonna talk about whiteout disorientation. Whiteout disorientation is one of those things that sounds minor until you actually understand what it does to your brain.
Okay, yeah, so this was what I was talking about earlier.
So, in Antarctica, a whiteout is what happens when the clouds, falling or blowing snow, and the ice surface all blend into one uniform sheet of light. The horizon disappears, shadows disappear, and everything, sky, ground, and distance, turns into the same blank, glowing gray-white. Meteorologists literally define it as a condition where visibility and contrast are so reduced that you lose all visual reference points, and the horizon can't be seen at all. If you're walking in that, you're basically inside a featureless sphere of light with literally no cues.
That'd be cool to film a movie in.
Up and down, or left and right, or near and far. If you've never seen a real whiteout, the best image, like mental image, is this. You're standing in the middle of a ping pong ball. Polar teams use that description over and over. One Antarctic blog talks about how, in whiteout, mountains in the distance and food boxes nearby all collapse into the same flat blur. distance becomes impossible to judge.
Bro.
NASA's write-up of field work on the West Antarctic ice sheet describes a glaciologist suddenly realizing he couldn't see the horizon at all. The sky and surface had fused into, quote, a shroud of sameness, and even turning in circles didn't bring anything recognizable back into view. And that's like the problem here. Your eyes are technically seeing, but your brain literally has like nothing to lock onto. In that environment,
So it's like an
navigation is
optical
almost
illusion.
purely instrument-based. You can't see slopes, you can't see small rises in the snow, and you definitely can't see things like snow-covered crevices. A flat patch of snow might actually be a bridge over a 30 to 100 meter drop.
Damn,
Antarctic
yeah.
safety manuals explicitly warn that in whiteout, it is, quote, very easy to walk over a cliff or fall down a crevice, unquote, because there are no shadows or surface irregularities visible at all. So whenever I'm talking about whiteout disorientation deaths, I'm talking about a chain. Loss of visual reference into loss of route into entering terrain you would otherwise have avoided into a fall or exposure that you can't recover from. And you can see that chain really clearly in some real accidents. In May 1981, British Antarctic survey workers John Anderson and Robert Atkinson were returning across the Shambles Glacier near Rothera Research Station. They were following an established track back to base when they ran into bad weather, quote, encountered bad weather and seemed to have strayed from the track, unquote.
Bro, going to Antarctica would be such a crazy feeling. I'm just thinking about that. Like being one of those people who are like going back to base in bad weather would feel so cool. You'd be like feel like an explorer, bro. That would feel so cool. I want to do that.
And their snowmobile went into a crevice. Their bodies were never
Obviously, it would be really dangerous. I'm not saying I'm not aware of that, but it would still be really cool.
recovered. There's a single memorial cross at Rothera Point. The write-ups don't use the word whiteout, but the description, severe storm, low visibility, crevice glacier, and a small deviation from the safe route, is exactly the scenario everyone trains for when they talk about whiteout risk. The danger isn't just out on remote traverses either. In November 1986, two Americans working near McMurdo Station decided to hike on the
Bro, that's in Antarctica? That's crazy. That's like a whole city even, kinda. That's crazy, damn.
ice only about 2 miles north of the base. They fell roughly 70 feet into a crevice and were killed. And that article that documents that event doesn't explicitly blame a whiteout, so I'm not gonna pretend that it does or say that it 100% was a whiteout, but it's a good example of how little margin there is. Even close to the largest US base on the continent, the landscape is broken enough that one wrong step on apparently flat snow is fatal. In low
Damn.
contrast or blowing snow, the odds of making that wrong step go way up. And you see
That's
the same
insane.
pattern again in more recent incidents. Like, in 2016, glaciologist Gordon Hamilton died when his snow machine went into a crevice in a heavily creviced shear zone about
Bro.
25 miles south of McMurdo. Again, it's not labeled as a whiteout event, but it's exactly the kind of terrain where whiteout disorientation is likely and most lethal. Lots of hidden fractures, few landmarks, and weather that can go from clear to unreadable
I'm locked in this dude's Minecraft Let's Play in the background.
in minutes. That's why field teams run crevice training, rope up, and mark safe routes with flags, because once visibility drops, you're basically walking blind on top of a broken plate. The most
Yeah,
extreme
damn.
whiteout disaster in Antarctica, though, isn't on foot, it's in the air. In 1979, Air New Zealand Flight 901, a DC-10 sightseeing flight, flew straight into the side of Mount Erebus, killing
Oh
all 257 people on board. A
my.
big piece of why the crew never
So they're just flying over Antarctica as like a sightseeing thing, bro. I would take that risk. I would do that. If I died, bro, that would be so cool to see because you would probably see the entrance to a Garth. Not even joking. Like that'd just be cool to see, even if no entrance to a Garth.
realized they were flying toward terrain instead of over the open sea was a phenomenon investigators called sector whiteout. Basically, the snow-covered slopes of Erebus and the overcast sky merged into one
Damn.
continuous white surface. The mountain basically disappeared into the background. A technical report on the disaster points out that in these conditions, pilots can't see relief or horizon, and the ground seems to be at a constant distance even as the aircraft ascend.
That's
That's
scary, dude.
whiteout on a larger, more lethal scale. The same sensory trick, just applied to a 250-person jet instead of just one guy walking. Modern expeditions are very, very aware of this, which is why you see all the inside a ping pong ball diary entries from recent solo and team crossings. People talk about staring at their compass mount for hours because there's literally nothing else to steer by. If they look up, they lose the line
That's what I'm saying. I would use a compass.
completely. In training, some teams even practice searching for a lost object or person in a mock whiteout by pulling pillowcases over their heads to stimulate the loss of horizon, just to drive home how easy it is for something a few meters away to become invisible. So when you boil it down, or, whatever, whiteout disorientation deaths aren't really about like dramatic blizzards throwing people off cliffs. They're about small navigation errors happening in a place where the visual world has been erased. You think you're walking on level ground because your eyes tell you everything is flat and close, but in reality you might be drifting off the flagged route, stepping onto a snow bridge, or wandering away from camp. In Antarctica, that tiny drift can be the difference between reaching a warm building and dropping into a crevice no one can even see. Next, I want to talk about the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, and
That's a
more
good name.
specifically the death toll that came from it. So there's this tight window from the late 1890s to the early 1920s where Antarctica went from blank spot on the map to place we sort of know but that just keeps killing us. It's roughly between 1897 and 1922. And we've already talked about a few of these examples, but I want to get more into this era as a whole because it's really interesting. And also the name heroic here isn't being like romantic or poetic or anything, it's literal. You pretty much had to be okay with a real chance of dying to even sign up for this. So the big pattern across this era
I would do it, bro. That stuff excites me so much. Like uncharted territory and stuff is so cool to me.
is that Antarctica was being explored faster than it was being understood. Nobody had long-term climate data. Clothing technology was primitive compared to what we have now. Nutrition science was still half like guesswork. People really didn't fully get how to prevent things like scurvy, or how many calories your body actually burns hauling sledges in sub-zero temperatures. So a lot of these expeditions were launched with massive national pride and fanfare, and underlying assumptions that were just flat out wrong. So if you zoom out and look at the whole era, it's basically a list of men being slowly taken apart by the environment in different combinations of the same few killers. Exposure, scurvy, frostbite, starvation, crevice falls, and bad decisions.
Bro, that frostbite picture was nasty. I have to go back.
Exposure, scurvy, frostbite.
Oh my, there's no way that's real. Holy shit. Oh my gosh.
Frostbite, starvation, crevice falls, and bad decisions just made under stress. So you've got like Scott's Terra Nova expedition, which we already covered, people dying from cold and exhaustion. You've got Shackleton's earlier expedition on the ship Nimrod, which was before Endurance, where he turned back before reaching the pole because he realized that if he pushed any further, everyone would probably die on the return. And then there are a few examples that are a lot less famous, but still equally brutal, like the Belgian Antarctic expedition between 1897 and 1899 on the ship Belgica was the first to overwinter in Antarctica on purpose or not. They got locked in the ice, trapped in darkness for months, and the crew started showing clear signs of physical and mental collapse. Scurvy, depression, hallucinations. And also, guys, I'm gonna be real with you. While researching this video, I did not know what scurvy was. I knew it was like a pirate thing, I guess.
Yeah, I don't either. Inform me.
But I thought I should go ahead and put this in the script to explain what scurvy actually is. So scurvy is what happens when your body runs out of vitamin C for too long. And vitamin C isn't just a healthy thing, you literally need it to build and maintain collagen. So it is healthy, but I mean, like, it's not like, oh, it's just a healthy thing you need to take, like whatever, like mom bullshit. Shout out all the moms out there. But anyway, collagen
Yeah, shout out all the moms.
Collagen is the stuff that holds your blood vessels, skin, and connective tissue together. So without it, everything starts to fall apart. Early on, guys would feel exhausted, weak, and depressed. Their gums would swell and bleed. Old scars could
Ugh.
reopen. Bruises would appear
Hopefully I never
from
get
almost
that.
nothing. As it got worse, their joints hurt so badly they couldn't walk. Their teeth loosened or fell out, and small injuries just stopped healing. And so in the Antarctic context here, this meant people who were already freezing and starving suddenly couldn't pull sledges, think clearly, or fight infection. And it's kind of like sad because it's completely preventable with fresh food, like citrus, fresh meat, anything with vitamin C. But during this heroic age, a lot of expeditions either just didn't fully understand that, or they couldn't keep enough fresh supplies from
Yeah, they probably didn't even know what vitamin C was, really.
freezing, spoiling, or just running out. So scurvy really fucked a lot of stuff up. But anyway, back to what I was saying about this Belgian Antarctic expedition. One sailor, Carl Winkt, was washed overboard and lost. Another, Emil
Rest in
Danko,
peace.
died of heart trouble after severe scurvy. The rest survived, but barely, and only
Right on.
after the ship's doctor forced them to eat raw penguin and seal meat to fight the deficiency.
Raw
And that really
penguin and
goes to show,
seal.
like, how early they were in the trial and error stage. And
Damn.
so honestly, I wrote a little bit more about this era, but I'm not going to read it because it's kind of just repeating that same shit over and over again. But yeah, this era was bad. People didn't know what
I swear there was one where they got stuck on the ship and they started eating each other.
they were getting into. Antarctica is scary even today, but back then, like over 100 years ago, people didn't know what the fuck they were doing or anything about Antarctica, and that
You didn't need
made
a
it
curse right there, bro.
Way worse. Okay, next I want to talk
That's scary.
about katabatic winds.
Ooh.
So, in simple terms, a
That looks interesting.
katabatic wind is a cold, dense mass of air that forms over the high interior of Antarctica and then falls downhill toward the coast under its own weight. The Antarctic plateau sits thousands of feet above sea level and
Is that an optical illusion, or is it just me, or does that look like it's like waving a little bit? Am I bugging, or does it look like it's like waving a little bit?
is brutally cold. Air sitting over that ice sheet cools down, becomes heavier, and starts to slide downslope like invisible water. As it drops, it accelerates, funnels through valleys and gaps, and can hit extreme speeds by the time it
That tent looked like a butthole.
through valleys and gaps and can hit extreme speeds
Right on.
by the time it reaches lower elevations. On paper, that's just like a neat bit of physics, but on the ground, it means you can go from slightly breezy to this wind can pick up rocks and tear doors off hinges in a pretty short time. These
Damn.
winds are strongest in places where there is a steep drop from the interior to the coast, especially in East Antarctica. Some coastal stations have recorded
Hold on, never east. So that'd be closer to like New Zealand, I think, area type deal.
regular winds over 100 kilometers an hour, or over 60 miles an hour, and gusts well above that. There are documented cases, especially from old French and Soviet stations, of katabatic winds snapping guidelines, flattening tents, and forcing people to literally crawl to avoid being blown over. Vehicles can be tipped or pushed sideways on
Damn.
ice. Even modern bases are designed with these winds in mind. Buildings elevated and streamlined so snow
That's
and
smart.
wind flow around them rather than just piling up and ripping
Dome.
things apart. And the structure of a katabatic wind also makes it dangerous in a less obvious way. Like, it's not just strong, it's cold and sustained. That air started off over the interior, where temperatures can be negative 40 degrees Celsius, negative 50 degrees Celsius, or worse. When that ass... Oh, dude, there's no way. Oh my god,
What?
I'm so tired. When that air mass
What was that for?
rolls down toward the coast, it drags that deep interior cold with it. So you're not just dealing with wind chill, you're suddenly standing in air that originated in one of the coldest places on Earth, now moving fast enough to strip heat from anything exposed. In a survival context, that means frostbite and hypothermia times are brutally short. And then for field parties, katabatic winds shape almost everything, like where you pitched
What about Wim Hof? Could he survive there longer.
Tents, how you anchor them, when you're allowed to travel, and what you carry. People are trained that if a katabatic event starts ramping up, you stop moving, lock everything down, and ride it out, because trying to navigate in blowing snow and 60 to 100 mile per hour wind on
60 to 100? Ay, ay, ay. And it's like it's snowy, so you can like feel it too, and it's like so cold. That would
a
suck.
featureless ice surface is exactly how you lose gear, vehicles, or people. Some crews describe it as the moment that the continent like wakes up, quote unquote. The sound shifts from quiet wind to a constant freight train roar.
What
as
if it is
air pours
alive?
down slope all around you. So
Because it's
next I'm
the
gonna move
entrance to Agartha, and the entrance opens, and then all of the wind comes out, and it's so cold.
on to some of how the
They stay there.
environment treats dead people. So in most environments, if a body is left outside, it
This is just like Mount Everest. On Mount Everest, there's like all the bodies up there that are just preserved, like they're in like a giant refrigerator.
breaks down pretty quickly. Bacteria gets to work, insects show up, animals scavenge, and within months to a few years, there's very little left. But Antarctica doesn't really work like that. The combination of constant sub-freezing temperatures, low humidity, and the almost total absence of scavengers means that bodies can be preserved in a kind of natural deep freeze. Flesh dries out and freezes instead of rotting. Clothing stays almost exactly how it was. In some cases, even facial features remain recognizable decades later. You can see
Damn.
this clearly in recoveries from more recent tragedies. When people have died in Antarctic crashes or accidents and couldn't be recovered immediately, later teams often found them in a condition that looks disturbingly recent compared to their
Is that
actual
a real picture? Damn.
date of death. The cold stops most of the microbial activity that would normally break down tissue. There are documented cases of remains exhumed years later with skin, hair, and clothing still very much intact. Not like mummies in the Egyptian sense, but something closer to a frozen snapshot. With the early explorers, you get the same effect, but just wrapped in more myth. Scott's Polar Party, for example, was found months after their deaths in 1912 inside their tent, essentially still preserved by the cold. Searchers were able to read diaries, identify everyone, and recover personal items because nothing had decayed in the usual way. In other polar contexts, like the Arctic, bodies buried in permafrost and later re-exposed have been found with boots, clothing, and even facial hair still visible.
So that makes me think like, what if, okay, so Antarctica, obviously the Earth, a long time ago, the continents were like connected, Pangea. So what if there's all of this preserved like animals that we never even knew about, and like dinosaurs even, and like more?
Antarctica has the same mechanics, but it's just even more extreme with less disturbance over time. And that same preservation effect applies to places too, and this is where it gets kind of creepy to me. Early expedition huts and camps in Antarctica are often
Is this dude playing on peaceful mode? I haven't seen a zombie. Or maybe I'm just having memory loss.
described as time capsules because the lack of rot, rust, and animal interference means they look like the people left yesterday. So at sites like Scott's hut at Cape Evans or Shackleton's hut at Cape Royds, you'll find food tins stacked on shelves, clothing hanging from pegs, tools laid out on tables, and even newspapers and personal items just still lying there like when they were dropped over a century ago. The wood is weathered but not eaten away. The canvas and rope are aged but still there.
Yo, I thought that was a dude right there. What is that? Yo, what is that right there? Is that a dude? What is that?
Nothing has been chewed apart by rodents or scattered by scavengers because there basically aren't any. Graves are the same story. Early expeditions sometimes buried their dead in shallow graves or marked spots near their huts. In almost any other landscape, weather, plants, and animals would eventually reclaim those sites. In Antarctica, the crosses and markers can stand for decades, and the ground beneath them changes incredibly slowly. The person buried there is not cycling back into an active ecosystem.
That's okay, a cool looking graveyard.
They're almost paused in place. Even more modern camps leave strange residue. You get this layered feeling that multiple eras of human presence are all still there at once. This is something that just to me, like, I just can't stop thinking about. Like, it's so creepy and interesting, so
Damn.
much to learn. It's almost like a liminal space. I don't know, just thinking about this and looking
I
at this
agree with
is
him.
incredible to me. Like, oh my god. It's so sad too. Okay, now I want to talk about some scary animals in Antarctica. First, I'm going to start with giant Antarctic sea spiders. Sea
Okay.
spiders are marine
These are the biggest arthropods in the world, I'm pretty sure. See how smart I am with that word too? Arthropods?
arthropods, distant
Nice!
relatives of spiders and crabs. They live in oceans all over the world, and in most places they're tiny. Think pencil eraser sized, a few millimeters across. In Antarctic waters, though, the same basic body plan, gets scaled up into something much more unsettling. Down there, some species grow to dinner plate size, with leg spans up to 30 to 35 centimeters, around a foot or more. What you're looking at is essentially an oversized spider silhouette
Bro, like where is its like is that its body? Like where's the brain and whatever?
walking along the seabed
Is that its
slowly.
head?
And their anatomy is weird even
That
before you
shit?
scale them up. Sea spiders are mostly legs, long, thin limbs radiating from a tiny central body. A lot of their internal organs, including parts of the digestive system,
Are they single-celled organisms? Yo, let's see if I'm right.
actually extend out into the legs themselves. They have a long tubular proboscis, basically a built-in straw, that they use to pierce and suck the juices out of soft-bodied animals like corals, sponges, anemones, and jelly-like plankton. So when you imagine one feeding, it's not like biting chunks off of something, it's standing over its prey and pretty much drinking it. But the whole, like, why are they so big down there part ties into a broader pattern called polar gigantism. In very
Bang.
cold, oxygen-rich polar water,
Call back to the start of the video when I said that. Oxygen-rich water.
some invertebrates grow much larger than their relative in warmer seas. One leading idea is that cold water holds more dissolved oxygen, and polar animals have lower metabolic rates, which together widen the window of body sizes that can function, giving lineages like pycnogonids, which is the scientific name of sea spiders, room to evolve into giants. Not
Right
every
on.
detail of that hypothesis holds up perfectly, but giant Antarctic sea spiders are one of the poster children for this phenomenon. Some genuses or genera of sea spiders down there even break the standard 8-leg expectation, and they
Whoa.
have 5 pairs of legs instead of
Whoa.
4, adding to the sense that these spiders run through
I want
some
that many
weird
legs.
alternate evolutionary rule set.
I
And
could
on
walk
top
so
of
fast.
The size and feeding, their
8
circulation
legs,
and breathing
bro.
systems are bizarre. Giant Antarctic sea spiders don't rely on lungs or gills the way that we think of them. Studies from the McMurdo station showed that they absorb oxygen directly through their exoskeleton and use the movement of their guts and legs to help distribute it, essentially using their legs as both support and a part of their respiratory system. And it's a body plan that makes sense mathematically. Lots of surface area are in those legs, but visually it really looks wrong in a way that's hard to ignore. Okay, now if anybody remembers from the deep ocean
I guess I was wrong. Probably not single-cell organism.
video, I talked about giant squid, but in this video I'm going to talk about the colossal squid.
I'm pretty sure the colossal squid is smaller than the giant squid. I could be wrong though. I think the giant squid is bigger. Whoa, what's next? The huge.
Everyone knows the giant squid from old sailor stories, but the colossal squid is actually heavier and more massively built. Giant squid are
Okay, I was wrong.
long and relatively skinny. Colossal squid are shorter, thicker, and built like a deep sea tank.
Oh, they're shorter. Okay, then maybe I was right.
The largest estimated specimens come in at maybe 10 to 14
Damn.
meters long, or 30 to 45 feet, including the long feeding tentacles. But
Damn.
what really matters is mass here.
Bro.
Some individuals are estimated around 400 to 500 kilograms. That's about
No way someone got this on video.
1,000
That's so
pounds,
rare.
based on the biggest
Damn.
pieces and partial catches that scientists have examined. But we do know that it is the heaviest known squid species, period. They live in the deep southern ocean, especially around Antarctica, in cold, dark waters that go hundreds
Are these fishing area vessels? Fishing areas of vessels? Route of the vessel. What?
To thousands of meters down. This is not a casual habitat. Light doesn't penetrate that far. Pressure is intense and temperature
Oh, that
hovers
looks so
just
cool.
above freezing. Everything down there has to be optimized for low energy existence, ambush hunting, or both. The colossal squid fits that perfectly. It's not a fast, agile surface predator. It's a huge, slow, heavily armed ambush animal sitting in near darkness, waiting for things to wander too close. And the detail that made me stop and like really get creeped out is the arms and tentacles. The colossal squid doesn't just have suckers. The suckers are lined with sharp, swiveling hooks. Some
Bro.
are simple hooks, some
I'm pretty sure this is why on all those sperm whales that sperm whales, blue whales, whatever, you'll see like that wash up on the shore. They have all these crazy scars on them, and I'm pretty sure, but they're from like giant and colossal squids because they have these crazy things.
are three-pointed, and they can rotate so they bite into and tear flesh instead of just holding it. So when it grabs onto a prey item, or you, hypothetically, it's not just sticking, it's grabbing.
Why does he think I would die to that, bro? I would not. I would punch it in its fucking one eyeball.
And it's ripping.
Sorry for
Giant
cursing.
squid
That was
have
scary.
toothed suckers too, which is a weird sentence, but the colossal squid's hooks are on another level in terms of like how much damage it really does.
Oh, damn.
Most of what we know about these come
So what I'm getting is a colossal squid could beat a giant squid in a fight.
from animals pulled up accidentally on long lines meant for Patagonian toothfish, which is the fish that gets marketed as a Chilean sea bass. Deep sea fishing in Antarctic waters has occasionally pulled up parts of colossal squid, tentacles, arms, or
Deep sea fishing in the Antarctic waters would probably be crazy.
whole individuals tangled in gear. In 2007, one of the best preserved specimens was brought up by a New Zealand vessel. It was a huge female, frozen and then later dissected by scientists.
Damn.
That animal weighed around 495 kilograms, and even though it wasn't the mythical biggest possible individual, it did confirm how like absurdly fucking heavy and muscular these things really are. Diet-wise with these, they aren't really eating on like small stuff. Evidence from stomach contents and scars on other animals suggests that they prey on large fish,
Scars,
and other deep sea animals, and they are almost certainly taking bites out of big Southern Ocean predators. A lot of sperm whales.
Hey, I was right even. I'm so bro. My ocean facts and Antarctic facts are on fire right now.
In Antarctic waters show circular scars and damage that match up disturbingly well with colossal squid hooks and suckers, which is really interesting because we can't really see a lot of like what's going down there, but it shows that you have this dynamic where one of the only things big enough to regularly eat colossal squid is the sperm whale, and the whales show that they've actually been in physical fights with them. And really, for me, I waited to talk about this, but the eyes are another thing.
Damn.
Based on the few good specimens we've had, colossal squid likely have the largest eyes of anything on Earth, on the order of 25 to 30 centimeters across, about the size of a dinner plate. That's the kind of eye size you evolve when you're living in near total darkness and need to catch the faintest silhouette of anything moving nearby, like a whale. It's overkill.
Imagine like looking through that eyeball. Like I wonder how it would look different. Like what would be different about it? You can just see more? Is that what it is? You can just like more can come in and you can process more light or whatever?
The water, but at 1,000+ meters deep, it makes sense. And dude, like just look at this.
Damn.
Dude. Okay, but moving on from colossal squid, let's talk about brinicles.
Brinicles?
So, under normal sea ice in Antarctica, the ocean isn't just frozen and that's it. When seawater freezes, the pure water becomes ice, and a lot of the
That's kind of satisfying to look at, how it's just like all squares. Like, bro, some of these are like perfect squares. Like right here is a perfect square, right here is a perfect square, right here's perfect. Bro, this one right here is very perfect.
salt gets pushed out. That extra salty leftover water is called brine. Brine is colder. It's way saltier than normal seawater, and it's also denser, which is important. That super cold, super salty brine doesn't just sit there in the ice. It starts draining downward through little channels and cracks in the sea ice, like
Whoa.
tiny little pipelines. And because it's denser than the water around it, once it escapes from the bottom of the ice, it literally falls through the surrounding seawater in a narrow
After I watch this video, I'm going to watch episode 4 of Invincible that just came out.
stream. And this is the beginning of a brine.
Season 4, episode 4.
The messed up part here is what happens as that brine stream moves. It's way
That
below the normal
looks sick.
freezing point of seawater, so as it sinks, it literally freezes the seawater around it. And the result
Damn.
is this hollow, downward
That's
growing
so cool.
ice tube. Basically an upside down icicle, reaching from the bottom of the sea ice down toward the seafloor. And
That's
that's
so
the
sick.
brinicle, the ice finger as it's called. It keeps growing as long as the brine is feeding into it and the surrounding water is still cold enough. Now, picture the seafloor in Antarctica. You've got starfish, brittle stars, sea urchins, and other slow-moving animals just kind of existing down there. They're not built for fast escape. As the brinicle reaches the seabed, the freezing brine starts to spread out along the bottom in a kind of creeping, super cold flow. Anything
Damn.
caught up in that flow literally gets flash frozen in place. There's this BBC clip from Frozen Planet where you see time-lapse footage of a brinicle forming and then this icy death zone crawling
Whoa.
across the seabed while starfish try to move away and just don't make
Hey,
it.
this one,
They
that one
just
got
freeze
away
solid
though.
where they
A
are.
couple of them
So
got
it's
away.
not like the brinicle actively hunts them. I mean, it's not alive or anything. It's just physics. Cold, dense brine falling, freezing everything it touches, and slowly expanding its kill radius on the seafloor. But visually, it's awesome and horrifying. It looks like this white, ghostly finger reaching down from the ice ceiling, then spreading a deadly frost carpet outwards. It's really horrifying. From above, you would just see normal sea ice. Everything interesting, like the brine stuff and the ice tube, all the freezing animals, that all happens underneath in pitch black water near the polar night. It's a totally invisible hazard unless you've got cameras or divers down there. It's really interesting and weird. Okay, next I'm gonna talk about glacier bloodfalls. And
This
yeah,
one's iron. I already
looks
knew this. I already know this.
exactly how it sounds. So this is happening at Taylor Glacier in the McMurdo Dry Valleys. There's a subglacial pool of super salty water trapped under the ice, like an ancient pocket of seawater that's been locked away for over 1 million years, cut off from the normal ocean and sunlight, and buried over about 400 meters of ice. And that water is hypersaline, which means it's saltier than the ocean. It's very cold and it's pretty much oxygen free, and it's loaded with dissolved iron and sulfate. Now, every so often, some of that brine finds a path out and seeps through cracks in the glacier. When it finally hits the surface and touches the air, the ferrous iron in the water oxidizes to ferric iron and falls out as iron oxide.
I'm so
it's
smart.
Basically rust.
My
And
fun
this
facts are
creates an
on right now.
orange-red
That should be
stain
an album cover too. That would be a cool ass album cover.
that you see flowing down the white ice. Early explorers thought it was red algae, and now we know that it's just iron. But it gets more interesting than this, because this actually is disturbing biology. It's not just geology. When scientists sampled Bloodfall's water, they found a whole microbial ecosystem, at least a dozen plus types of
Whoa.
bacteria, almost no oxygen, and a chemistry that
I bet the zombie virus is in there.
looks nothing like a normal lake or river. These microbes don't rely on sunlight at all. Instead, they use iron and sulfur compounds to run their metabolism. Things like
Damn.
sulfate and ferric iron acting as electron acceptors instead of oxygen. One model is
Bro, if there can be life there, there can also at the bottom of the ocean, there's like these deposits where all of these minerals are like, it's super deep down where like no fish are or anything. They're like these deposits where all of these like minerals and like chemicals start like coming out, and animals just survive off of those chemicals. They figured out how to photosynthesize without the sun. They photosynthesize using those chemicals. And so thinking about that, like there is 100% life on another planet. If life can adapt to situations like that, there's 100% life on another planet. Intelligent life, I don't know, maybe, hopefully, but Definitely life.
is that they're using sulfate in a kind of short-circuited way to drive the reduction of iron 3 to iron 2. It's really confusing in like school shit, but basically they're hacking the usual reaction chain to get energy, and they're adapted to do it in a place with no light and no fresh organic food using iron. And then visually, of course, when that brine
Bro, that would be such a good like Red Hot Chili Peppers album cover. I don't know why. I don't know what makes me think of that. Don't they have like an album cover where like a pool is red thing? That's maybe why I'm thinking of that.
seeps out over the ice, you get red streaks, crusts, and mats that look like the glacier has an open wound. Under a microscope, it's like layered communities of extremophile bacteria. Some are related to sulfur oxidizers and iron reducers, some to halophiles, which is salt lovers, and psychrophiles, which is cold lovers. They're basically living in liquid that would pretty much like kill most other life immediately. It's super salty, it's below freezing, there's no oxygen, there's no sunlight. But Blood
Damn.
Falls is not the only place like this. It's the most dramatic looking one, sure, but across the McMurdo dry valleys you see orange, green, and red microbial mats in meltwater streams, lake edges, and other salty seeps. These
Right on.
mats are built from communities that go dormant, reawaken when they get brief pulses of liquid water, and run on weird redox chemistry more than just classic plants plus sunlight logic. It's really, I don't know, like the kind of biochemistry that most people only ever see drawn on a whiteboard in like a chemistry class. Except here it's real and it's staining the ice and the rock. But what's really interesting, like the fact that gets me about this, like the disturbing part, is that Blood Falls here is an ecosystem that has been sealed off in the dark in brine for maybe millions of years.
Yeah,
and it
bro.
just like keeps going and kept going for millions of years. The microbes down there are essentially proof that life can survive in a cold, salty, oxygen-poor pocket under ice. And that's why you constantly see this place brought up in conversations and articles about Snowball Earth and potential life on Mars.
That's what I'm
or
saying.
icy
God literally
moons.
just said
Because
that.
if bacteria can keep a hidden mini biosphere going under a glacier in Antarctica, it's really not hard to imagine something similar under Martian ice, or on places like Europa. Okay, the last animal I want to talk about.
That'd be so cool if we found life like in our own solar system on like one of those moons, on one of Saturn's moons.
Not the last thing, but just the last animal I want to talk about are these weird ice fish
Ooh.
in Antarctica.
Ice
So in
fishes.
Antarctic waters, there's a whole family of fish that basically, I guess just decided they didn't want to do blood the normal way. These are ice fish, family Chanichthylidae, and the main thing that you need to know about them is that they are the only vertebrates we've found that do not use hemoglobin at all. So that means no red pigment, no red blood cells carrying oxygen the way
Really?
every other vertebrate does. Their blood is this pale, almost clear fluid instead of red. Normally, that would be an instant death sentence. Hemoglobin is what lets your blood move oxygen from your lungs or gills to the rest of your body. But the Southern Ocean around Antarctica is stupidly cold and loaded with dissolved oxygen. Cold water can hold a lot more
What is dissolved oxygen?
oxygen than hot water, so these fish are living in what is basically an oxygen-rich fridge. That environment lets them cheat. Instead of packing oxygen into red blood cells, they just dissolve it directly into the blood plasma and move it around that way. It's not efficient, but down there it's enough, even if barely. Now, because that system is so weak compared to normal fish, their whole circulation setup has to be overbuilt to compensate. Ice fish tend to have big hearts for their body size, large blood volumes, and wide blood vessels so that their clear blood can
Just
be
like
pumped.
how do they evolve to use that? He probably just explained it. I was kind of zoning out a little bit, but like what is the purpose of that even? Why not just like there are probably other animals in the area that breathe with a red and have blood. Like why?
quickly without too much resistance.
Just like in my head, it's like a fish, and it's like, yo, Loki, fuck blood. I'm not gonna have blood.
They also run on a slower metabolism in general because the water is so cold, so their tissues don't demand oxygen at the same frantic rate that you'd see in a warm water fish sprinting around a coral reef. It's kind of like their bodies and their organism is designed and tuned for like a low power mode, if you know what I mean. On top of the clear blood, they've also got antifreeze proteins floating around in there. Antarctic fish in general do this. Special glycoproteins that stick to tiny ice particles and stop them from growing, which lets their body fluid stay liquid even when the seawater is below 0 degrees Celsius.
Interesting.
So now their blood is clear, low oxygen, spiked with antifreeze, being pushed hard enough through oversized plumbing in water that would kill most fish. It's
Bro, that is a
really,
crazy ass animal.
interesting in like, how the fuck did this happen, you know? This is definitely good evidence for evolution, because this is like, what the fuck? And speaking of evolution, the evolutionary story is kind of funny in a dark way. Their ancestors almost certainly had hemoglobin like everyone else, but in a cold, super oxygenated
environment, they said, fuck blood, we don't need it.
Very stable environment, mutations that damage the hemoglobin genes weren't instantly fatal. Over time, the machinery for making red blood cells and hemoglobin just broke down and never got fixed, because the fish could still scrape by using dissolved oxygen and plasma. In some ice fish, the genes for hemoglobin are now just non-functional leftovers. From the outside, a lot of ice fish look kind of plain. Pale, maybe semi-see-through, not giant monsters or anything. But the disturbing part is what's underneath. But now I want to change gears a little bit into some different types of things from Antarctica. In particular, some modern era actual tragedies and real stories. So,
yay, maybe they'll finally talk about cannibalism so I don't look stupid.
In February 2012, Brazil
even though I already look stupid,
got hit with one of the worst case scenarios you think about when you design an Antarctic base. Their power plant caught fire. This was at Commandante Ferraz Station on King George Island. The blaze started in the early hours of February 25th in the generator/machine room, which is the worst possible place because that room is literally the heart of the station's power and heating system. There were 59 people on station that night. Once the fire got going, it spread through the main buildings fast enough that they couldn't just fight it and stay. Most of the scientists and support staff were evacuated by helicopter over to Chile's Free Base and other Navy stations, while a smaller group of Brazilian Navy personnel stayed behind to try to bring the fire under control. And that's where the deaths happened. Sub-Officer Carlos Alberto Vieira Figueiredo and First Sergeant Roberto Lopes dos Santos were killed while fighting the fire inside the burning structure. And another sergeant was injured, but survived after treatment at a neighboring station. And what makes this feel so different from, say, a warehouse fire back home is the reaction. This turned into an instant multi-country emergency. Chilean crews launched boats and helicopters. Argentine and British ships came in. People from other stations showed up with pumps and firefighting gear. Everyone knows that if a main Antarctic base loses its power and housing in winter conditions, you don't just lose buildings, you potentially lose everyone still there. In the end, about 70% of the station was destroyed, the main complex with living quarters and labs, and only a few separated structures and tanks survived. Okay, next up, I'm going to talk about...
Wait, so what happened to the people? Are they good, hopefully? I would assume so.
McMurdo Station crevice accident. So, McMurdo Station and Scott Base sit almost within sight of each other on Ross Island, connected by what should be one of the safest, most predictable routes you can walk in Antarctica. There's a flagged road between them, groomed and checked, because everyone knows the rule. Stick to the marked line and you're usually fine. If you step off it, you are trusting a glacier that you can't...
Yo, by the way, the house this dude is building looks cool as hell. I like it a lot in Minecraft.
Can't see inside. In November 1986, 2 American workers from McMurdo decided to hike over towards Scott Base and chose to leave that marked route. The details you see again and again in write-ups are really chilling, but they're simple. They took a shortcut across the ice, not far from the station, in a place people thought they understood. The surface would have looked like a normal snowfield, flat, quiet, and solid. But underneath, it wasn't a normal snowfield. The ice in that area is broken by crevices, deep cracks created as the glacier slowly moves and stretches. Over time, blowing snow can bridge those cracks and create a thin ceiling that looks like part of the normal surface. From above, there's no obvious warning. It doesn't sag and there's no like dramatic crack line like in the movies. You can walk on that snow bridge dozens of times and be fine, and then on the next step, it decides that you're too heavy or the structure is too weak, and then it just collapses. When the two men stepped onto one of those hidden bridges, the floor basically dropped out from under them. They fell about 70 feet down into a crevice. And it's not really it wasn't like a narrow crack that you could wedge yourself in. It was a real shaft in the ice with vertical walls and a long way to the bottom, only a couple of miles from McMurdo's buildings and vehicles. People at the station realized something was wrong fairly quickly, and a rescue team was sent out with ropes, harnesses, and crevice extraction gear. Getting someone out of a 70-foot ice crack in Antarctic conditions is
70
its
foot?
own ordeal. Rescuers have to anchor themselves to solid ice, rig a
Bro.
haul system, get someone lowered in safely, stabilize the injured people as much as they can in a cramped freezing space, and then bring them up slowly without causing more collapse. In this case, the team managed to recover both men alive from the crevice,
Right
which
on.
is already a huge logistical effort that has to happen under cold, time pressure, and the constant fear that the crevice walls could shift. What's sad is that both of these people died from their injuries despite being pulled out. A 70-foot
No.
fall onto hard, uneven ice
Bro,
doesn't
you're
leave a lot
kidding.
of room for survivable outcomes, even if you're rescued quickly. There's no trauma hospital nearby, there's no helicopter waiting on a normal city helipad, and there's no easy way to get someone to full surgical care. You've just got station medics, whatever equipment is on hand, and I don't know, Antarctica. It's really sad. Okay, next I want to talk about the story of Rodney Marks.
Rodney.
Marks was a
That's some fun hair.
32-year-old Australian astrophysicist wintering over at Edmondson Scott South Pole Station in May 2000. He'd been
Right
to
on.
the pole before, and he was working on a telescope project at an observatory building a short walk from the main station. On May 11th, walking back from that observatory, he suddenly started getting seriously sick. Blurred vision, chest pain, trouble breathing, a lot of anxiety because he didn't understand what was happening. Over about 36 hours, he went to the station doctor 3 separate times as his symptoms got worse. The doctor didn't have a real hospital to work with, just basic equipment and drugs in a small clinic at the bottom of the world. Literally the bottom of the world. And then on May 12th, the next day, Marks went into cardiac arrest and passed away at the station.
Damn.
At that point, nobody knew why.
Mark.
Because it was deep winter at the South Pole, his body couldn't be flown out for months. Planes simply don't land there in that season, so his remains stayed at the station while the official line was basically sudden natural causes, exact cause to be determined later.
Bro.
When flights resumed and his body finally reached Christchurch, New Zealand, the autopsy changed everything. Tests showed that he had lethal levels of methanol in his system. And
What?
methanol is an alcohol, but it's not regular drinking alcohol, it's wood alcohol, the kind used in some industrial solvents and lab fluids. In the body, methanol gets turned into toxic byproducts that cause acidosis, blindness, organ failure, and death. And the symptoms match what he'd gone through almost perfectly. New Zealand authorities opened an investigation because the South Pole Station is
Bro.
operated through New Zealand's gateway and sits in the Ross dependency sector that they claim. They looked at the obvious theories. Suicide didn't fit because Marks had a fiance at the station, a career going really well, and easy access to normal alcohol. Plus, he
Yeah.
was actively going to the doctor and asking for help, not hiding what he had done. A deliberate poisoning by someone else was on the table in theory, but there was no solid evidence pointing to a specific person, motive, or event. What the lead detective eventually leaned toward was a more depressing possibility, that Marks ingested methanol by accident, probably through some kind of contamination or mislabeling. For example, a bottle that had both technical methanol and drinkable alcohol run through through it, or a
Damn.
container that wasn't what he thought it was. By the time that conclusion was floated, though, it was mostly guesswork built on a few facts and a lot of missing pieces. Any physical evidence that could have confirmed exactly what he drank, a particular bottle or batch, was either gone, used up, or never properly identified. New Zealand investigators also later said that the US contractors running the station weren't especially cooperative. In the end, the coroner's report pretty much just landed in a unsatisfying place, that Rodney Marks died of methanol poisoning, and that no one knows, like, it's unknown how he got it, it's unknown
He definitely got
what
poisoned.
really happened, and there's
I
no
bet.
evidence or not enough evidence
Because
to
they were
call
like,
it a suicide,
fuck you, I'm
a
gonna
murder,
fuck your
or an
wife,
accident.
probably.
Okay, but now let's switch gears and get into something a little bit more recent. Okay, so Bellingshausen is a small
That's
Russian
German, I
base
bet.
on King George Island. It's the kind of place where you really can't get away from anyone. On October 9th, 2018, that kind of isolation finally snapped. In the middle of the day in the station canteen, Sergei Savitsky, a 54-year-old
He looks nice enough.
engineer, stabbed Oleg
Okay.
Beloguzov,
Oh
a
my gosh.
52-year-old welder, in the
Okay, I
chest
stand
with a kitchen
corrected.
knife. And apparently this wasn't any kind of spur of the moment kind of thing. The two men had been working together at Bellingshausen for about 6 months, and Russian reports talk about strained relations and problems between them that had been simmering for a while. Some outlets pushed the story that Belousov kept spoiling the endings of books that Savitsky was reading. Others said he mocked him in the dining room and told him to dance on the table for money. The only thing everyone agrees on, though, is that there had been tension and that alcohol was likely involved. After the
Bro.
stabbing, Beloguzov
Stabbed
had
him in
to
the
be
chest because he leaked the ending of what, like Harry Potter? Bro, I shouldn't be laughing at this, but he's like, Harry Potter fucking kills Voldemort, right?
evacuated to
That was a bad spoiler. I couldn't think of any spoilers from Harry Potter.
Chile, flown out to a hospital in Punta Arenas for emergency surgery. He survived and was eventually discharged, which is already a small miracle considering how far from real medical infrastructure he was when it happened. Savitsky didn't run or barricade himself. He reportedly walked straight to the station manager and turned himself in. For about 10 days, he stayed at the station under watch, at one point being confined to the base's small Russian Orthodox church, until
Damn.
he could be flown out and sent back to Russia.
That is a
There,
small
he was
church.
put under house arrest in St. Petersburg and formally charged with attempted murder. But here's where it gets even crazier. The legal ending here is almost as strange as the actual stabbing. So when the case reached court, Savitsky was described as remorseful, and Beloguzov told the judge he forgave him and didn't want to see him punished. And then the prosecutor actually ended up dropping the charges. The judge
Damn.
agreed and closed the case without a prison sentence. They must have been bros, man. I don't know. Maybe they were just
That's
buddies
chill.
and they had a little argument. I don't know, man. But I mean, that's cool, I guess, dude. Unless he was like,
So just one of his boys was spoiling the endings, and he got pissed off and stabbed him in the chest. I mean, maybe you overreacted a little bit, but if one of my boys did that to me, I'd be like, hey, come on.
coerced into doing it. Next part, I'm going to talk about the Sene 4 incident.
This one
Sene
sounds
4
nuts.
is a already pressurized environment before anything went wrong. It's a South African base perched on exposed rock in Queen Maud Land, surrounded by ice, wind, and nothing else. A small overwintering crew goes in by ship, gets dropped off, and then the ship leaves. Once that happens, they're basically sealed in for about 10 to 13 months, depending on ice and weather. There's no quick flight, no supply run next week, there's no we'll send someone to pick you up. It's just that group, that building, and the outside world on the other end
Bro,
of a
that's scary.
satellite link. So, in early 2025, the team was 9 people. They had been through screening, psychometric tests,
Right on.
the usual Antarctic prep. They sailed down on the research and supply ship S.A. August 2. They were dropped off at Sene 4 in February, and they watched the ship turn around and go back to Cape Town. That's the moment the clock really starts. You are now committed to riding out this winter with exactly the people who are standing next to you. Now, according to South Africa's Environment Environment Ministry, the trouble at Sane 4 started to officially register on February 27th, 2025. That is when an accident was reported where one male team member physically assaulted the base leader during some kind of dispute over a task that depended on the weather. And that's already really bad in a 9-person station. The person in charge gets attacked and everyone sees it or hears about it, and suddenly the chain of command has a crack in it. But then more came out. That same man was accused of sexually harassing a colleague and of making at least one death threat against another team member.
Damn.
Government statements later confirmed the assault and said sexual harassment allegations were under investigation, while stressing that there had been no actual sexual assault. But from inside the base, that distinction really didn't make anything safer. You're not dealing with any kind of theoretical risk anymore. You're living in a building with someone that you now identify as violent and unpredictable for so long. At some point after the assault, one of the crew members sat down at a computer and decided to do the one thing they could do: send an email out of the station and hope that somebody somewhere would take it seriously. That email ended up being leaked to the press, the Sunday Times in South Africa first, and then echoed by outlets like AP, Global News, and others. The wording is blunt and pretty raw, so here's a quote from it. "I remain deeply concerned about my own safety, constantly wondering if I might become the next victim." The writer describes this colleague's behavior as having, quote, "escalated to a point that is deeply disturbing." They talk about attacks and threats causing a, quote, "environment of fear and intimidation." And they basically beg for action to protect themselves and the rest of the team. And so now everyone, knew what was going on, and the whole world knew, but these 9 people were still stuck together. This is crazy.
Oh, they can't.
And, disturbing and, dude, I don't know. It's just something about it is just imagine being stuck with 8 people and one of them is actually a sexual predator. Bro. dude.
He's I'm sorry. I'm coming after this guy. I feel like I'm not coming after him, but let's get a replay on that.
It is just imagine being stuck with 8 people and one of them is actually a sexual predator.
Is actually a sexual predator.
Bro. Dude.
Bro.
Dude. At that point, I can't say that because I can't condone anything. But I don't know, man. It's scary. I don't know what I would do in that situation. If I was stuck there for a whole year, dude, I don't know what I would do, honestly. Okay, next I want to talk about something a little bit different. So, if you talk to people who have actually wintered over in Antarctica, they usually don't describe one big snap of change for how they feel. It's more like the continent slowly rewires how your brain works and everyone just kind of accepts it. Over a full winter, most crews describe some version of winter over syndrome. It's not an official diagnosis with a lab test. It's more this repeated pattern that people keep writing about. Basically, your mood drops, you get irritable for no good.
Because you have a vitamin D3 deficiency because you don't see the sun that much. They need to start taking more vitamin D3.
Reason, sleep stops working properly, and your short-term memory gets weird. People talk about forgetting simple things, losing track of what they were doing mid-task, or having trouble focusing on stuff that would be easy back home. And then there's this thing that's literally called the Antarctic stare. Someone just sitting at a table, eyes unfocused, zoning out into space for way too long. Not in crisis and not freaking out, but just blank. The environment also feeds into it hard. At inland stations, and especially the South Pole, you get months of polar night where the sun literally just does not rise. Day and night stop being real categories and they just collapse into lights up in the building versus lights dimmed. But your body doesn't really fully believe it. So circadian rhythms drift. Some people just start going to bed later and later. Others wake up in the middle of what should be their sleep window and then just lie there. Sleep quality tanks, and the mood usually goes with it. Add in cabin fever stuff, like same few rooms, same handful of faces, same recycled air, the view outside switching between dark and windy, and slightly different dark and windy, and you get this slow grinding sense that time really isn't moving properly. A lot of the psychology work down there,
bro. I bet it's not, because it's colder. I bet time moves slower because it's colder. Call me crazy, but It makes sense, kind of, if you think about it.
Ends up describing something like psychological hibernation. The brain basically, again, I think I used the same analogy earlier, hits power save mode. People don't literally sleep all the time, but their emotional range shrinks. They feel flatter and less reactive. Socializing drops off. Initiative also drops off. They still do their jobs and follow their routines, but there's less spontaneity, less curiosity, less hey, let's go do something. From the outside, it can look like nobody cares about anything anymore, even though they're technically functioning fine. The station keeps running and tasks get done, but the atmosphere shifts into this low energy hum where everyone's a little bit slower. And I would not want to go to Antarctica. Guys, if you made it this far in the video, let me know. Let me know in the comments on YouTube or Spotify. Would you want to go to Antarctica? I wouldn't. Fuck that shit, dude. Leave that to the
I would want to go. Goodbye.